Hello, everyone. Today we're starting a new series on Saturn and the signs. But before we begin, I want to thank you all for the support, the likes, and the subscriptions. I really appreciate you being here. Now to Saturn in the signs. Saturn is where the chart gets serious. It describes the part of life that asks for patience, maturity, discipline, and accountability. It shows where you meet limits, where you feel pressure to grow up, and where life does not usually let you get away with shortcuts. A lot of people hear Saturn and immediately think of fear, delay, restriction, or bad luck. Those associations are not entirely wrong, but they are too narrow. Saturn is really about structure. It shows where you are being asked to build something real, where you are tested, where time, effort, and consistency matter more than impulse. This placement says a great deal about how a person handles responsibility. Some people respond by becoming highly controlled and self-disciplined. Others feel the weight first and only develop strength over time. Some try to avoid Saturn's lessons altogether, but avoidance usually makes the pressure stronger. That is part of what Saturn explains. It gives shape to endurance, not the easy part of personality, not the part that moves quickly or effortlessly. The part that has to be developed through experience, mistakes, restraint, and repetition. Because of that, Saturn is often tied to difficulty, but it is not limited to difficulty. It also describes mastery. It describes self-respect. It describes the strength that comes from learning what can last. This is the part of the chart that deals with reality as it is, not as we wish it would be. It shows where we need boundaries, where we need backbone, and where life may feel slow until we become more grounded in ourselves. And that is where the sign becomes important. Saturn does not teach the same way in every sign. The sign changes the tone of the lesson, the kind of pressure a person feels, and the style of growth they are being asked to develop. In some signs, Saturn becomes highly disciplined, controlled, and practical. In others, it becomes more internal, more relational, more intellectual, or more emotionally complex. The weight may still be there, but the way it is carried can look very different. That is what this series is about. We are not just looking at where someone feels blocked or unlucky. We are looking at how Saturn actually works through each sign, what it demands, what it strengthens, what it matures slowly, and what happens when that energy is handled with wisdom instead of fear. Saturn can show where life feels heavy, but it can also show where a person becomes solid, capable, and deeply self-possessed over time. So as we go through Saturn in the signs, the goal is to understand the deeper mechanics of the placement, how it tests, how it hardens, how it protects, how it matures, and how it can become one of the strongest parts of the chart. And remember to like and subscribe if you want to follow the series, and book a consultation for a more personal understanding of your chart. Now to Saturn in Libra. Saturn in Libra has a very particular job, learning how to build real balance instead of just looking balanced while quietly unraveling behind the scenes. Libra is the sign of relationship, proportion, taste, fairness, social grace, and the strange human art of trying to make two people exist in the same room without it turning into a blood sport. It watches dynamics. It notices tone. It clocks when something is off, when someone is overstepping, when the exchange is uneven, when the piece is fragile and being held together by one polite sentence and a tight smile. Then Saturn steps in and raises the stakes. Now partnership is not casual. Choice is not casual. Boundaries are not casual. Harmony is not casual. Everything starts carrying more weight. So Saturn in Libra often belongs to people who take relationships seriously, sometimes before they even know what a healthy relationship actually is. They may feel responsible for keeping things smooth. They may become highly aware of fairness, manners, reciprocity, and how much emotional labor is being traded across the table. They may want closeness very much, yet feel pressure around getting it right. That can create a strange pattern. The person may be charming, thoughtful, and easy to be around on the surface, but inwardly there can be a constant calculation. Am I being fair? Am I asking too much? Am I giving too much? Should I say something? Should I let it go? Is this worth the conflict? Is this my fault? Is this salvageable? Do I even like this? Or am I just trying to make it work because I hate awkwardness? Saturn in Libra can spend a lot of time in that exact neighborhood. This sign usually dislikes ugliness in human behavior, not in a decorative sense. Although Libra does have opinions about visual chaos and furniture placement that could fill a small book. I mean ugliness in the relational sense. Pettiness, crudeness, needless cruelty, emotional sloppiness, one-sided arrangements where somebody keeps pretending things are fine while slowly turning into a ghost with nice manners. Libra wants civility. Saturn asks what it costs to maintain it. That is one of the main themes here. These people often know early on that relationships are serious business. Sometimes they grow up around tension, coldness, instability, distance, or uneven power. Sometimes they watch adults perform politeness while resentment drips from the wallpaper. Sometimes they become the mediator, the peacekeeper, the one reading the room, and adjusting themselves to prevent friction. So they get skilled. They learn how to smooth things over, how to phrase things gently, how to keep the tone pleasant, how to see both sides before anyone has finished one sentence. That can make them wise, diplomatic, and impressive in social situations. It can also make them far too willing to carry the burden of keeping everybody comfortable. And that is where Saturn in Libra gets tired. Because maintaining peace is not the same as living in truth. The shadow here is not obvious chaos. It is over-accommodation, delaying decisions, staying reasonable long after the situation stopped being reasonable, being so committed to fairness that you forget to ask whether you are the one doing all the adjusting. This sign can become very polished around discomfort. Someone says something rude. Saturn in Libra smiles and files it away. Someone takes more than they give. Saturn in Libra notices, explains it to themselves, gives another chance, then another, then another. Someone keeps crossing the line. Saturn in Libra starts writing an internal legal brief about context, stress, nuance, timing, and whether maybe this could all be resolved with a well-worded text and better lighting. Sometimes yes, sometimes absolutely not. That is one of the great lessons here. Peace that depends on self-betrayal is not peace. It is just a prettier form of strain. And Saturn in Libra eventually has to learn that the hard way. There is often a serious education here around partnership. Not fantasy partnership. Not we both love brunch and eye contact partnership. Real partnership. Shared effort. Mutual respect. Reciprocity. Accountability. Repair. The difference between compromise and quiet resentment wearing pearls. These people are often drawn to the idea of an equal bond. They want something graceful, mutual, adult, and clean. Something where both people show up properly. But getting there is not always simple, because Saturn tends to test whatever it touches. So relationships may feel delayed, weighty, instructive, or unusually revealing. The person may attract situations that force them to examine imbalance. Who gives more? Who leads? Who decides? Who apologizes first? Who bends? Who avoids? Who pretends everything is fine because conflict feels like swallowing glass? Saturn in Libra watches all of that. And it does not let the person stay naive forever. Another major theme here is indecision, but not the shallow version people joke about. Not just should I get the blue one or the cream one, although Libra can absolutely take a scenic route through a menu if given the chance. Saturn in Libra indecision usually comes from the weight of consequence. The person sees too many angles, too many implications, too many possible effects on everyone involved. So choosing can feel loaded. Say yes, and something else gets excluded. Say no, and somebody may be hurt. Speak directly, and the atmosphere changes. Stay quiet, and the imbalance deepens. This sign often knows that every decision rearranges a pattern. That awareness can make the person thoughtful. It can also make them stall. And when they stall too long, life starts choosing for them. That is not a pleasant lesson, but it is an important one. Because Saturn in Libra is here to develop judgment. Not endless weighing. Not permanent hesitation. Judgment. The capacity to read a situation clearly and make a sound choice without needing perfect symmetry before moving. That takes maturity, especially for a sign that can be deeply uncomfortable disappointing people. Saturn in Libra often has a strong conscience. It wants to be decent. It wants to be measured. It does not enjoy unnecessary harshness. But if that conscience gets twisted by fear, the person can become too careful, too accommodating, too eager to avoid being seen as unfair. Then they start swallowing what should have been spoken. And swallowed truth does not disappear. It ferments. That is when the nice tone starts getting brittle. The smile gets thinner. The "it's fine" starts sounding like a hostage negotiation with scented candles. So one of the most important developments here is learning how to confront without becoming cruel, to set terms without feeling barbaric, to stop treating every act of self-respect like a possible diplomatic incident. This sign needs real boundaries, not decorative boundaries, not boundaries that sound beautiful and collapse on contact. Real ones, the kind that can survive another person's displeasure, the kind that do not need unanimous approval, the kind that protect dignity, time, energy, and emotional equilibrium. At first, that may feel unnatural. Saturn in Libra often wants things handled elegantly. Ideally, no raised voices, no slammed doors, no drama, no spiritual TED Talk from the person who just ignored your needs for 6 months. But life does not always give elegant conditions. Sometimes clarity arrives wearing boots, and Libra has to survive that too. There is also something deeply adult about Saturn in Libra at its best. This is one of the signs where Saturn can do good work. Traditionally, astrologers have considered Saturn strong in Libra, and it makes sense. Libra understands order between people. Saturn understands structure. Put them together in a mature way, and you can get someone with real poise. Not fake niceness. Poise, the ability to think before reacting, the ability to negotiate, the ability to bring fairness into difficult situations, the ability to stay measured without becoming cold, the ability to see complexity without drowning in it. That is a gift. A mature Saturn in Libra can be excellent in counseling, law, design, mediation, diplomacy, partnership work, art, leadership, negotiation, or any path where judgment, proportion, and tact matter. They often have a good eye, not only for beauty, but for composition in the broader sense. What belongs where? What works together? What disrupts balance? What feels heavy-handed? What needs adjusting? This can show up aesthetically, socially, professionally, emotionally. There is usually a refining instinct here. But again, refinement has to stay connected to honesty. Otherwise, it becomes performance. Then you get the polished exterior, the lovely language, the excellent posture, and underneath it all a person who has not admitted they are angry, exhausted, or settling for crumbs served on a very tasteful plate. Saturn in Libra cannot grow that way. It grows by becoming more sincere. That might sound strange, since Libra is already associated with fairness and ethics, but sincerity is slightly different. Sincerity is what happens when the outside and the inside finally stop negotiating against each other. When the person is no longer saying the nice thing while privately living in a completely different truth. That is when this sign becomes powerful, because then the diplomacy is real, the kindness is real, the generosity is real, and the no is real too. That is important. A fully developed Saturn in Libra knows how to say no with grace. Not apology stacked on apology. Not 10 paragraphs and a fruit basket. Just clarity, delivered cleanly. That is a major upgrade for this sign. Love can be especially instructive here. These people often want a relationship that feels elegant in the deepest sense. Not necessarily flashy, just well-made, mutual, thoughtful, respectful, pleasant to inhabit. They often care a lot about how two people treat each other day after day. Tone matters, effort matters, consideration matters. They are usually not impressed by grand declarations from someone who cannot manage basic reciprocity. Good. They should not be. Still, early on, they may confuse potential with partnership. If two people could be good together in theory, Saturn in Libra may spend far too long trying to engineer the missing pieces. But a relationship is not a restoration project for your inner design consultant. Sometimes the structure is wrong. Sometimes the exchange is uneven. Sometimes the chemistry is there and the maturity is not. Sometimes the person is attractive and emotionally built like a folding chair. These are hard truths, useful truths. Saturn loves those. So over time, this placement often gets better at discernment in love. Less romance with an improvement plan. More respect for what is actually happening in the room. Less attachment to appearances. More concern with substance. Less fear of being alone in an imperfectly styled apartment. More fear of staying in something dead just because it photographs well from a distance. That is growth. There can also be a subtle struggle here around self-definition. Libra naturally pays attention to other people. It calibrates. It responds. It adjusts. With Saturn here, the person may become so attentive to balance that they lose direct contact with their own preferences. They know what works for the group, what is fair, what would keep the atmosphere manageable, but what do they want? Not what is agreeable, not what is reasonable. What do they actually want? That question can take time to answer. Because Saturn in Libra may have spent years developing social intelligence before developing personal certainty. Eventually, though, that changes. The person gets older, more grounded, less frightened by disruption. They stop trying to maintain universal approval and start building a life that actually fits. That is when their choices become stronger. Their relationships improve. Their work becomes cleaner. Their whole energy settles. There is often great elegance in mature Saturn in Libra. Not just aesthetic elegance, moral elegance. A person who knows how to be fair without becoming weak. Who knows how to listen without disappearing. Who knows how to compromise without collapsing. Who knows how to keep beauty in the room without denying reality. That is not superficial. That is hard-earned. So if you have Saturn in Libra, the lesson is not to become colder or harsher just to prove you have boundaries. It is to become more solid inside your own sense of justice. To stop over-negotiating what already feels wrong. To stop dressing delay up as wisdom when it is really fear of displeasing someone. To let decisions be clean. To let standards be real. To remember that agreement is not the only measure of health. To build relationships where care travels both ways. You are here to learn adult partnership, adult judgment, adult balance, not the fragile kind that shatters the moment somebody frowns. The sturdy kind, the kind with self-respect in it, the kind with honesty in it, the kind that does not depend on pretending. And when this sign matures, it can become one of the most graceful placements in the chart. Thoughtful, fair, composed, discerning, and deeply capable of building bonds that are not only beautiful to look at, but strong enough to live inside. That was Saturn in Libra. Please like, subscribe, and stay with me for the rest of the Saturn in the Signs series.